Okay, as you'll remember, the third point of Tiresias' prophecy was don't touch the sun god's cows. Now, Odysseus and his crew just made it past the Sirens. They just made it past Scylla and Charybdis, and we're going to pick up right off the coast of the sun god's cows. So here we go. From the black ship, far still at sea, I heard the lowing of the cattle winding home, and sheep bleating, and heard too in my heart the words of blind Tiresias of Thebes, and Circe of Aea. Both forbade me the island of the world's delight, the sun. So I spoke out in gloom to my companions. Shipmates, grieving and weary though you are, listen. I had forewarning from Tiresias and Circe too. Both told me I must shun this island of the sun, the world's delight. Nothing but fatal trouble shall we find here. Pull away, then, and put the land astern. Well, that strained them to the breaking point, and cursing, Eurylochus cried out, Are you flesh and blood, Odysseus, to endure more than a man can? Do you never tire? God, look at you. Iron is what you're made of. Here we all are, half dead with weariness, falling asleep over the oars, and you say, No landing. No firm island earth where we could make a quiet supper. No, pull out to sea, you say, with night upon us, just as before, but wandering now, and lost. Sudden storms can rise at night and swamp ships without a trace. Where is your shelter if some stiff gale blows up from south or west? The winds that break up shipping every time when seamen flout the Lord God's will. I say, do as the hour demands and go ashore before black night comes down. We'll make our supper alongside, and at dawn put out to sea. You might remember this is not the first time that Eurylochus has challenged Odysseus' leadership, right? Back at Circe's island, it was Eurylochus who had saw the guys get turned into pigs and ran down to Odysseus and said, let's get out of here, our men are pigs. And when Odysseus said, no, follow me, we'll go get the men back, Eurylochus said, why should we follow you? Last time we followed you into the Cyclops cave, you got a bunch of us eaten. And I didn't make much notice of it, but at that moment, there was like two lines where Odysseus wanted to chop Eurylochus' head off. And people came between. They said, chill out. This is another challenge to Odysseus' leadership from the same guy, Eurylochus. He's like, let's just stop one night. Because Odysseus just wants to keep on going. Just one night, we won't touch the cows. Now, when the rest said aye to this, I saw the power of destiny devising ill. Sharply I answered without hesitation, Eurylochus, they are with you to a man. I am alone, outmatched. Let this whole company swear me a great oath. Any herd of cattle or flock of sheep here found shall go unharmed. No one shall slaughter out of wantonness ram or heifer. All shall be content with what the goddess Circe put aboard. Well, they fell at once to swearing, as I ordered. And when the round of oaths had ceased, we found a half-moon bay by the beach, and moored the ship in, with a fresh spring nearby. All hands ashore went about skillfully getting up a meal, and then after thirst and hunger, those besiegers were turned away. They mourned for their companions plucked from the ship by Scylla and devoured, and sleep came soft upon them as they mourned. In the small hours of the third watch, when stars that shone out in the first dusk of evening had gone down to their setting, a giant wind blew from heaven, and clouds driven by Zeus shrouded land and sea in a night of storm. So, just as dawn with the fingertips of rose touched the windy world, we dragged our ship to cover in a grotto, a sea cave where nymphs had chairs of rock and sanded floors. I mustered all the crew and said, Old shipmates, our stores are in the ship's hold, food and drink. The cattle here are not for our provision, or we pay dearly for it. Fierce the god is who cherishes these heifers and these sheep, Helios, and no man avoids his eye. Well, to this my fighters nodded, yes, but now we had a month of onshore gales blowing day in, day out, south winds or south by east. As long as bread and good red wine remained to keep the men up and appease their craving, they would not touch the cattle. But in the end, when all the barley in the ship was gone, Hunger drove them to scour the wild shore with angling hooks for fishes and seafowl, whatever fell into their hands, and lean days wore their bellies thin. So you can see here that you have entrapment, basically, right? The gods said, you will not be able to keep on going. The storms continued. So one day I withdrew to the interior to pray the gods in solitude, for hope that one might show me some way of salvation. Slipping away, I struck across the island to a sheltered spot out of the driving gale. I washed my hands there and made supplication to the gods who own Olympus, all the gods, but they, for answer, only closed my eyes under slow drops of sleep. Now on the shore, Eurylochus made his insidious plea. Comrades, he said, you've gone through everything. Listen to what I say. All deaths are hateful to us, mortal wretches. But famine is the most pitiful, the worst end that a man can come to. Will you fight it? Come, we'll cut out the noblest of these cattle for sacrifice to the gods who own the sky. And once at home, in the old country of Ithaca, if ever that day comes, we'll build a costly temple and adorn it with every beauty for the Lord of Noon. But if he flares up over his heifers lost, wishing our ship destroyed, and if the gods make cause with him, then I say, better open your lungs to a big sea once for all, than waste his skin and bones on a lonely island. Thus Eurylochus and they murmured, aye, trooping away at once to round up heifers. Now that day tranquil cattle with broad brows were grazing near, and soon the men drew up around their chosen beasts in ceremony. They plucked the leaves that shone on a tall oak, having no barley mew to strew the victims. They performed the prayers and ritual, knifed the kine, and flayed each carcass, cutting thigh bones free to wrap in double folds of fat. These offerings with strips of meat were laid upon the fire, and then, as they had no wine, they made libation with clear spring water, broiling the entrails first. And when the bones were burnt and tripes shared, they spitted the carved meat. And just then my slumber left me in a rush. My eyes opened, and I went down the seaward path. No sooner had I caught sight of our black hull than savory odors of burnt fat eddied around me. Grief took hold of me, and I cried aloud, O Father Zeus and gods in bliss forever, you made me sleep away this day of mischief. O cruel drowsing in the evil hour, here they sat, and a great work they contrived. Lampetia, in her long gown, meanwhile, had borne swift word to the overlord of Noon. They have killed your kine. And the Lord Helios burst into angry speech amid the immortals. O Father Zeus and gods in bliss forever, punish Odysseus' men. So overweening, now they have killed my peaceful kine, my joy at morning when I climbed the sky of stars, and evening when I bore westward from heaven. Restitution or penalty they shall pay, and pay in full, or I go down forever to light the dead men in the underworld. Then Zeus, who drives the storm cloud, made reply. Peace, Helios, shine on among the gods, shine over mortals in the fields of grain. Let me throw down one white-hot bolt and make splinters of their ship in the wine-dark sea. Calypso later told me of this exchange, as she declared that Hermes had told her, well, when I reached the sea cave and the ship, I faced each man and had it out. But where could any remedy be found? There was none. The silken beeves of Helios were dead. The gods, moreover, made queer signs appear. Cowhides began to crawl, and beef, both raw and roasted, lowed like kine upon the spits. Now 6 full days my gallant crew could feast upon the prime beef they had marked for slaughter from Helios' herd, and Zeus, the son of Cronos, added one fine morning. All the gales had ceased, blown out, and with an offshore breeze we launched again, stepping the mast and sail to make for the open sea. Astern of us the island coastline faded, and no land showed anywhere, but only sea and heaven. And when Zeus Cronion piled a thunderhead above the ship, while gloom spread on the ocean. We held our course, but briefly. And then the squall struck whining from the west with gale force, breaking both forestays, and the mast came toppling aft along the ship's length, so the running rigging showered into the bilge. On the afterdeck, the mast hit the steersman a slant blow, bashing the skull in, knocking him overside as the brave soul fled the body like a diver. With crack on crack of thunder, Zeus let fly a bolt against the ship, a direct hit, so that she bucked in reeking fumes of sulfur, and all the men were flung into the sea. They came up round the wreck, bobbing a while like petrels on the waves. No more seafaring homeward for these. No sweet day of return. The god had turned his face from them. I clambered fore and aft my hulk until a comber split her, keel from ribs, and the big timber floated free. The mast, too, broke away. A backstay floated dangling from it, stout rawhide rope, and I used this for lashing mast and keel together. These I straddled, riding the frightful storm. Nor had I yet seen the worst of it, for now the west wind dropped and a southeast gale came on, one more twist of the knife, taking me north again, straight for Charybdis. All that night I drifted, and in the sunrise, sure enough, I lay off Scylla Mountain in Charybdis deep. There, as the whirlpool drank the tide, a billow tossed me, and I sprang from the great fig tree, catching on like a bat under a bough. Nowhere had I to stand, no way of climbing the root and bole, being far below, and far above my head the branches and their leaves, massed overshadowing Charybdis pool. But I clung grimly, thinking my mast and keel would come back to the surface when she spouted. And how long and with what desire I waited, till at the twilight hour, when the one who hears and judges pleas in the marketplace all day, between contentious men, goes home to supper. 6 o'clock. The long poles at last reared from the sea. Now I let go with hands and feet, plunging straight into the foam beside the timbers. I pulled astride and rowed hard with my hands to pass by Scylla. Never could I have passed her had not the Father of gods and men this time kept me from her eyes. Once through the strait, 9 days I drifted in the open sea before I made shore, buoyed up by the gods upon Ogygia Isle. The dangerous nymph Calypso lives and sings there in her beauty, and she received me and loved me. That's right. So, his men eat the cows. They're stuck there for a month. They run out of food. They eat the cows. So Zeus blows their ship up, and nobody survives except for Odysseus, who drifts all the way to Calypso's island. And let's finish here. But why tell the same tale I told last night in hall to you and to your lady? Those adventures made a long evening, and I do not hold with tiresome repetition of story. This is why now when we go to Calypso's island, we're actually going backwards in the story, well, forwards in the story. We're going to book 5. So this is book 12. We're going to go to book 5 to read about Calypso. So he lost his crew. He lost his ship. He's going to be at sea for many more years on Calypso's island. And that's what we'll read next.